Hey, hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to Friday. Happy Friday. If you could introduce yourself in the chat as you come in, that would be great. I see we have an incredible number of otters here taking notes with us. So I will go ahead and get started in the interest of time. Let me share my screen with you all. Why am I having a hard time with this? Okay, great. So welcome to today's Health Council Talk. Today we are joined by Carter Bundy, who will give us an overview of the legislative process and how to inform policies. For our land acknowledgement, the New Mexico Alliance of Health Councils humbly recognizes and acknowledges we are on unceded territory and ancestral lands of the original peoples of New Mexico's Pueblos, Apache Nations, and the Navajo Nation. Together, we acknowledge the history of genocide, dispossession, colonization, and ongoing systemic inequities while strengthening and respecting relationships with Indigenous peoples. We give thanks to the past, present, and future stewards of this land and respect all tribal nation sovereignty. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous resiliency, self-determination, and self-governance of New Mexico's tribes and nations who are still here today. All right, let me admit everybody. Okay, so just a few reminders before we get started. Again, if you have any updates, times, locations to your Health Council meetings, if you could just let me know so that we can get that updated on our website so that folks are easily able to attend meetings with you. This coming Wednesday, we have the Community Collaborative Forum. It's a hybrid event. In person is closed. We're already maxed out. Zoom is still open, and we have like over 200 people scheduled to join us on Zoom, but it's going to be great. We're going to have a whole experience with a lot of interaction. So please do join us. Peer learning, we have our next one May 16th and then May 17th. And then if there's any membership agreement questions, information, you can reach out to Geraldine. Right, so like I said, we have Carter Bundy with us today, who has a ton of experience in legislative action and works, especially here in New Mexico. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Carter to introduce himself and we'll get started.
Thanks, Sam. I think that was Sam's nice way of saying I'm old.
Never.
That is what experience is to a large degree, as some of you, I'm sure, know, and the rest of you will eventually find out. So quick thing, and it's not a huge deal, but I love it when people do have their cameras on. You don't have to. A lot of it's my sort of describing stuff, but I really want you to feel free to ask questions anytime you have them. You don't have to wait till the end. I think we can just sort of ask as we go along, sort of when it comes to a natural stopping point on each page. Happy to address things while the questions are still fresh in your minds. So first of all, thank you for what you all do. I will tell you, I came to the work that I do. I'm a recovering attorney. I practiced for 5 years in New York after law school. And a buddy of mine was on the Gore campaign. And I'll be honest, I mean, one of the major factors, I think, for a lot of us who end up getting involved in political work, and I know this is a nonpartisan organization, I'm just describing my background, but a lot of the reason a lot of us get into this political work is because healthcare is such a problem in this country. We underserve a lot of people. It's incredibly expensive when you can get access to it. And it's something that, even when you don't end up needing it, it's kind of always hanging out there, sort of hanging over your heads. I mean, I've worked really hard for, 30 years in the workforce, and I have health insurance, and I still worry about if something happens that's significant to me or my wife or my child. So what you do in trying to expand access and affordability of healthcare and quality for New Mexicans is really almost the most important single thing anyone can do. So you should be proud of the work you do, but I just want to say, like, just as a citizen of New Mexico, really thank you for the work you do. And so I'm really thrilled to be here because I love the success that you've had at the legislature so far, and anything I can do to help advance that, I'm proud to be a part of. So why don't we move on to the next slide? So, a really important piece of advocacy, it sounds simple, but you'd be amazed how many people just show up at the legislature and just sort of are supporting their organization. But you really have to have specific goals and a legislative agenda. And you want to think about what you can achieve in this legislative session, in this next legislative session, knowing that oftentimes it takes 2, 3, 5, 10 years to get the legislation that you want. And sometimes when you're playing defense, it is an ongoing battle that you have to play defense every single year. But you should have an idea really close to a year in advance, 6 months certainly in advance of a session, of what you want to achieve during the legislature. Now, some of that will be impacted. Again, I know you're nonpartisan, but regardless of party affiliation or where you stand on the political spectrum, a lot of what is possible for any organization really depends on elections. Sometimes that means uh, primaries in either party where people, in your case, are more receptive to expanding healthcare access and affordability and using health councils as a vehicle for that. It very much depends on who the governor is. So that's an important thing both for primaries and for the general election. So you can't always know what's going to be possible, but a way to really think about setting your goals and legislative agenda is what is the best possible outcome I can get with this group of 70 representatives, 42 senators, and one governor, and in this particular session. So one important thing for all of you to know, especially going into the 2026 session, is the 26 session, as all even numbered sessions are, is it's only 30 days and it is limited in the Constitution, the New Mexico Constitution, to uh, items that directly affect the budget of the state of New Mexico and also things that the governor puts on what's called her call. When she calls the legislature into session, it's a formality, they have to meet. But when she calls them into session, she can send messages and say, I'd also like you to work on these aspects of our criminal justice system. For example, will almost certainly be something this governor talks about and allows to be legislated in the 2026 session. So it's a little more narrow, but for your purposes, because so much of what the Alliance of Health Councils and what each of your specific health councils needs is money, it means you get to advocate for the thing that's probably the most significant legislative piece that you would have been looking to act on anyhow. Let me just stop right there. Any quick questions, sort of about broadly setting goals or what the 2026 legislative session starts to look like? Okay, well, we're going to go through a few things today that are somewhat helpful. There is a difference between lobbying and advocacy, and we'll talk about that. It's sort of technical. And then we're going to talk about really some important advocacy tactics. It'll strike a lot of you as sort of common sense, common courtesy, being a decent person. Um, it is incredible how much that gets overlooked when people talk about lobbying in any body, whether it's Albuquerque City Council or Bernalillo County Commission, the legislature up in Santa Fe, Capitol Hill. A lot of being an effective advocate really means being your best version of yourself. So we're going to talk about some of that. And I think sort of in popular culture, there are a lot of movies about politics and lobbying and things like that. People think you have to be extra clever or crafty, and you really don't. Like every single one of you can do this. You really can, and a lot of you have done it. But anyone can do it, and there's no magic, oh, if you just say these words, you're going to get something done, or if you buy them all off, you'll get that done. I'm sure there is some corruption in state legislative politics and city and county and certainly in federal. But for the most part, you can have a lot of success playing it clean, doing it the right way. And really, I think you have a huge advantage in your role as health councils because you have such an incredible story to tell that really affects the constituents of each and every one of these legislators. So you have something, I know you don't make political contributions and all that stuff and can't. But you really have a lot of power because you are performing an incredibly important service that affects their constituents and makes their constituents' lives better. And I was thinking last night about there's almost always someone who says like, "Oh, isn't it about just like who contributes the most?" When you think about contributions in politics, it's not the money per se that's important. It's that the money helps them get elected and reelected. What you're doing helps them get elected and reelected because as cynical as we all can be about this, when a legislator has a chance or a governor to really provide something of value to the voters of New Mexico and the non-voters, but to the voters, that's who elects them. Um, they jump at that opportunity because it's something they'll talk about when they're campaigning. So don't feel that just because you're not working directly on campaigns or giving money that you don't have something really important to offer legislators. The very thing that you do for a living, the reason that you got into this is also the reason that legislators will be interested in what you have to say and hopefully be interested in supporting what you're doing. We'll talk about other groups, right? So you can control how you advocate, but there are a lot of other people in the roundhouse who work in county commission settings. So we'll talk about alliances, coalitions, and opponents. We'll talk about mobilizing people in public opinion and post-session accountability as well. And then at the very end, we'll hopefully have a little bit of time to do some role playing because again, people are kind of like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. You all can do it. And especially because you believe in what you do, you know what you do. And that is really the most important part of being a good advocate is really knowing your subject matter as well as anyone else and believing in it and being able to make your case. So let's go to the next slide. So the main difference between lobbying and advocacy, um, lobbying is something where you're trying to get an elected official or just a government employee to to influence legislation, essentially, and sometimes executive actions as well. Um, it is important to know that advocacy is all that work generally, but advocacy also includes influencing the public or talking to the press. Those are things that would fall under the general umbrella of advocacy. Lobbying is when you're really talking to those elected officials. And next slide, you're really only a lobbyist for legal purposes, and that's important because you have to file with the Secretary of State and things like that. Um, when you're compensated for the purpose of lobbying, if you're the director of a health council and you show up for a day or two during the session, that's not going to be something that triggers your requirement to be a lobbyist. And this is all from the New Mexico lobbyist guidelines. I've pretty much cut and pasted directly onto here. So if you're not compensated for the specific purpose of lobbying and in a substantial or regular basis you engage in lobbying the state legislature, you do not have to file as a lobbyist. The city of Albuquerque has its own lobbying requirements and standards. I don't think that's something that the Bernalillo County Health Council is in front of often, but they do have their own standards as well, which you can find at the clerk's website for the city of Albuquerque. It's possible some other jurisdictions do as well, some other cities and counties, but for the most part, this is what, when you're lobbying at the Roundhouse, you really only need to worry about if you're being paid to, on a regular or substantial basis, talk to state officials. It doesn't mean that if you're not registered as a lobbyist that you can't engage on some level. Next. So this is sort of what, yeah. Oh, so this goes back to what I already sort of talked about. That an advocate is very broadly the act or process of supporting your cause or proposals. That has a million different, there are a million different ways to do that. Lobbying is really a pretty specific activity that can trigger some legal and filing requirements. But as I said, I don't think most of you are going to fall into that category. The people that you do have who are at the Roundhouse on a regular basis should register as lobbyists. It costs $50. It's not too difficult. But most of you probably won't have to do that, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be advocating for your causes, including at the Roundhouse. Next. So this sounds like a little Boy Scout thing or Girl Scout thing. Integrity, honesty, and credibility is everything in that building. I don't care how big a donor you are. I don't care how noble your cause is. If legislators can't trust you, if they think, that person kind of shades the truth sometimes, even like once, I remember they told me that this bill did this, but it really didn't, or that they said their organization worked on this issue and they really don't. Um, you won't be trusted again. And I will tell you that the Roundhouse is, it's the biggest legislative forum that we have in the state of New Mexico. I will tell you, it is a small, small world. I mean, anybody who's lobbied up there for more than a year or two, we all know each other. Legislators all either know you personally or at least know your name. And I promise you, there's so many dead times in the legislature. People just gossip, people talk about people. And you always want, when your name comes up, whether they like your policies or don't like your policies, or, sort of think you're fun or interesting or smart, whatever they think of you that way, the one thing you have to have them say is like, yeah, I trust that guy, or I trust that woman, or like, yeah, they're pretty good that way, or like, oh, that's somebody I'll go to for more information. Credibility, integrity is everything in that building. And I know some of you are probably rolling your eyes as like politicians and credibility, integrity. I promise you it's true. It doesn't mean that they all have it. But if you're somebody that they are relying on for information, there is nothing worse for a legislator than being publicly embarrassed. They are all, it's sort of strange. They're all very thick-skinned because they run for office and they get criticized and all that. But they're also all very thin-skinned. Like there really aren't, and it's almost without exception. Like they're all thin-skinned. Like they don't like being made to look stupid. I mean, none of us do really, but because they have to run for election and they obviously, there's never been a politician who didn't think somewhat highly of themselves, to put yourself out there and run. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Um, but boy, if they are made to look foolish, oh, I talked to Carter and he said that if we raise the minimum wage to $14 an hour, we're going to be the 10th highest in the country. And it turns out that that would make us the second highest in the country. And somebody calls them out on that. It doesn't really matter what the substance was. They were made to look foolish and they were made to look like they don't know what they're talking about. And they might have even been made to look like they were dishonest because intentionally or not, I misinformed them. You never want to be that person. And by the way, people make mistakes, but as soon as you make a mistake, make sure you go to them and explain it was a mistake and clean it up when you can. I mean, this almost could be the entire training, like integrity, honesty, credibility, reliability, all those things. So I know that you're all sort of like, well, I learned that in Sunday school, or it's carry it with you. Be the best version of yourself when you are advocating for your cause. Um, Sometimes it's tempting. Sometimes, it's a split-second decision. Somebody texts you in a committee where they might be the swing vote. There is really never any one bill that is worth sacrificing your word, your integrity, any of that stuff for one vote. You can always come back and introduce it the next year, or you can get something reintroduced later in a session. You can never get your reputation back. I mean, over the course of a lot of years, you can, but people will remember that. This is an important one. The world is pretty partisan right now, but the reality is no permanent enemies, no permanent friends. Democrats and Republicans alike have constituents who need health care. So for your issue in particular, you really should feel open about reaching out to everybody. It doesn't mean you're going to get everybody's vote. It doesn't mean they're going to fund health councils at the level you want every session, but you should feel great with your issue and what you do to talking to anyone. So even if personally, you're MAGA or you're super left or whatever it is, like you may have some people who you work with more than others, but sometimes they'll say, hey, I can't support this or I can't support it at this level because of this other priority. And you'd be surprised. There are people who might not be traditional people who you agree with on many issues, but they might be open to you on a particular issue. Um, so, so it's okay to disagree. It's okay sometimes to disagree with some passion, but you never want to burn bridges, and you want to, even though you want to be passionate, you do want to have an even keeled temperament. You want people to say that person's in control, they know what they're doing. There's enough chaos, they get yelled at enough already by everyone else. Don't be the person that makes their day more difficult, because at the end of the day, they are going to get to vote on your bill, your issue, and you don't want them thinking like, God, yeah, because they don't know a lot of this stuff. So they're relying on their relationship with you and what they think of you. So, um, hopefully they're voting on the issue, but they don't know this stuff in detail. So you really have to have them say, that's somebody I like, that's somebody I trust, it's somebody I respect, it's somebody who is honest with me. I think I'll support them. So passion is important, but keep your cool. Getting the right sponsors is really important. And here, when we reference HB 75, that was a bill you had for funding for health councils. What happens with a lot of budget bills like that is they get heard so that committees, there are really two types of committees. One are substantive committees and then there are finance committees. There's one finance committee in each house, although I guess you could call tax and rev in the House a second finance committee. Um, but what you want to do is you want to have your issue heard in front of people who work, for example, on healthcare, and that's what you did. In fact, HB 75 was passed through the House Health and Human Services Committee. So you got that through, and then it went to House Appropriations, and then they put money in the budget. So House Appropriations rarely votes on your bill in particular, but what they do is they see, oh, this is a bill that had an appropriation in it, and and we like what it has in it, and it's had a hearing to work out potentially some of the issues, maybe to work on amendments. So that really helps the House Appropriations and Finance Committee. For those of you who don't know, New Mexico's budget, much like the federal budget, starts in the House. The House of Representatives hears it first, and then they pass it over to the Senate. So getting the right sponsors is important because a good sponsor like Representative Liz Thompson, um, Wanda Johnson, who's chair of House Government Elections and Indian Affairs. Actually, that's where your bill was heard before it went to House Appropriations. I'm getting those people who can then talk to House Appropriations and Finance Committee Chairman Nathan Small, the Vice Chair Meredith Dixon. Nathan Small's from Las Cruces, Meredith Dixon's from Albuquerque. Having sponsors who can advocate for your bill, especially when there's money involved, who can talk to people behind the scenes, getting good sponsors who know your issue, who care about it, who have the time. Sometimes a legislator will say, I really don't know if I'm going to have the time to do this. That's okay. Take the no from them and find somebody else. Somebody will carry your bill. Somebody will advocate for your legislation. If a legislator says, I just am not going to have the time, like there really are a million things going on up there, just respect that and know that it doesn't mean they don't like you. It's not that they don't like you or care about health councils or healthcare issues. It's that they really may be taking on some huge issues already. Someone else may have gotten to them earlier, or they've taken on a new leadership role on the House floor or something like that. And take them at their word because they're being helpful to you by saying they can't do it, because when you're in the heat of the session, you want to be able to meet with your sponsor, you want to be able to strategize with your sponsor, and you want to be able to make sure that they're doing the work behind the scenes to get support from other legislators, because you can't talk to every single one of them. This last point down here is really important, and you are lucky because I have to say I deal with a lot of organizations. I have organizations I've worked with for a number of years. um, your website is honestly probably the single best one I have ever seen in this state, and really anywhere, in terms of explaining what your priorities are, explaining what your bills look like, giving you advice about how to lobby and what the process is. Your website is something you should use. Your website has information about how to reach out to people. It is really good. Take advantage of that website all the time. Not everyone, I mean, honestly, almost no one has that kind of resource at their disposal. So you have talking points, you have ideas about how to reach out to legislators. Really go to that site, like bookmark it, because it is something you can use not just at the session, but I think sort of on a regular basis. Next. So this is something that's really important, especially for committees. You want to give your legislators who are going to be friendly, who you've already spoken to, and especially your sponsors, you want to give them talking points. You want to give them questions because you'll have some experts. It'll be probably one of you plus some legislators who are at the table during a committee hearing. Let me see, I can't see everyone else, but how many of you have actually done work on going to committee or going to the roundhouse before? Let me see if I can pull that up. I see Geraldine raised her hand. Yeah, Daryl. Yeah, as you know, somebody has to actually present the bill. So you want to make sure you have a good expert. Mia is raising her hand. You want to have a good expert, um, and you'll also have a legislator there. The more you can do to prepare for that, it's sort of like anything in life. Like preparation is really important. It'll make your presentation go well. Think of the arguments that people who don't like it, or maybe who do like it but want to know more detail, think about the things they will try to ask. And you can rely on people who have been through this process before too. Um, Talk to legislators early and often. In person is best, but they have so many conversations over the course of a day. Have a handout. I will tell you, I try to put mine on a color of paper, sort of goldenrod, or sometimes like a salmon color that sort of stands out a little bit. But people hand white pieces of paper too sometimes. Having a handout's nice. You want to make the handouts easy to read. You rarely want to be longer than one page, especially for one bill. Um, and you want to make sure when you're talking to them, if it is over a specific bill, that you tell them the bill number. And you want to make sure that your flyer, your handout, has the bill number on it. You'd be amazed. Like people think like, oh, everyone knows about this issue, and you hand it to them. They really don't. Like, I mean, they know healthcare is an issue. They don't know what the health councils are for the most part. They don't know all the good outreach you're doing in the community. They don't know where this money is going. It's up to you to really educate them. Have short and long pitches. That's a big part of the education. Some of them, sometimes if they're bored or just have time between committee and floor, or they came into the roundhouse early and they don't have a morning committee, you may get to sit down with them for like half an hour and just sort of shoot the breeze and talk about a lot of things. You may get half an hour. Certainly it happens that you get 10 minutes with legislators sometimes, especially if you're visiting in person in their office, or if you're visiting in the interim, sort of between legislative sessions, like this time of year, if you are able to get a meeting with a legislator, and our legislators are most of them are really incredibly accessible. In some states, in bigger states, certainly where they have, instead of 40,000 people in their district, they might have 300,000 people. It becomes much more difficult. And also, other legislatures run much longer than New Mexico. Some run till May or June, some run all the way into September or October, even. We're lucky here. They are unpaid, which is difficult for them, but most of them will be accessible, especially if you're a constituent, or at least if you live in sort of the same city or county. Reach out to them and you will find you get plenty of time. So know your bill, know your issues in depth, but also be prepared to catch somebody in a hallway and give them a 10-second pitch and really practice it. Really think about if I only get 10 seconds walking between, I saw them coming out of the bathroom, they're going back to the committee room. I get 10 seconds with them, 20 seconds with them. What do I need them to know about this bill, or this item that I want in the budget? So it's important to really be able to distill your presentation down a lot, but also you want to be able to talk about it in depth. One of the things beyond all the character issues we talked about that's really important is when you're up there, you should know your issue. There'll be some other people who know it well, but you should know it as well as anyone, better than most people, hopefully. And you're fortunate that the thing that you're advocating for is what you do for a living. So for most of you, that's going to be fairly natural. But really, like if somebody's going to ask, well, what other funding sources are there for health councils? You should know that. Or how do you spend most of your day? Or what does your health council do? Or how many people did you reach out to? Think of the questions that legislators are likely to get asked. And it's going to be stuff that really goes to the heart of how are you an effective organization? Why should we invest in you? Be prepared to give them data, give them statistics about how many people you've reached out to. If you're able to track how many people signed up for different forms of healthcare through the health councils, that is an amazing type of statistic that you can give them. Because then you're talking about like the thing you're funding actually directly impacts people's lives. There's so much in the roundhouse that's just kind of, maybe this will work, maybe it won't, we don't know. You're doing this every day, every week, every month, and you have a story to tell. Know that story and know it in detail. And so even though you live it, think about like what data can I compile? Can my team compile? Can I rely on the county to help compile, or even maybe the new healthcare authority at the state? See if there are ways that you can aggregate some data and really be able to add that to your story, because legislators, again, it seems fantastic to some of you, but they really do want to feel like almost everyone who goes up there, maybe even everyone who goes up there, wants to believe that they're doing some good for somebody. Like they're not all, you know, don't be too cynical about it. I mean, you should be somewhat cynical, but no matter how good or bad a person they are, they really want to believe they're doing something. They want to everyone likes to justify our own existence, right? They want to feel like they're doing something good for somebody. So give them that meat. Give them, throw that to them. Make them feel good about it. Make them feel like they have an insider's knowledge of what's going on. The last point here is really important too. Develop relationships with staff, especially for like House Appropriations Chair and Vice Chair and Senate Finance Chair and Vice Chair, because so much of what you do has to do with the budget. Those are people that you want to know because they may be able to help you get a meeting with Chairman Small in the House or Chairman Munoz. in the Senate Finance Committee, they certainly can be effective in making sure that they get handouts. So those sort of things. Um, and of course, like everything, just be kind to them because they'll tell their legislator, just because they're not legislators doesn't mean they're not important. In fact, they're critical. And a lot of the time, legislators are so busy, they can't actually meet with you. So develop those relationships where you can. Next. Can we get the next slide? Yeah, there you go. This is important. Obviously, any piece of legislation, including the budget, requires the governor's signature. We are one of a majority of states where the governor has the power to line item veto. So you want to make sure that you are talking to someone in the administration, and they're tough to get a hold of, but you can usually meet with somebody, especially in between sessions. Um, Find somebody at the healthcare authority, find somebody, you can literally call the governor's office and say, I'd like to talk about healthcare. And she will have a staff person who it'll be somebody you can usually get a meeting. You might have to plan a month in advance for it, but try to get the administration's support for your bill, and especially for budget issues. So I know that that is something the health counselors have done well in the past. Keep doing that because the governor can veto a bill, but more commonly, they can just sort of let it be known this isn't something I want to spend money on, or this isn't a priority for me. And legislators just aren't going to waste their time pushing legislation. I mean, they still might support it, but they're not going to push it hard and get it over the finish line if they know it's just going to be vetoed, or it's not going to get funding. We already talked about knowing your subject matter. Know your vote count. This is really important. Maybe the biggest single mistake people make on a day-to-day basis when they go and lobby is they have a positive conversation, which is great. You're up there, you're doing your job, you're having an in-person conversation with the legislator. Again, they don't really know this stuff. They all are kind of pleasers on some level. They are in an industry where their very job, even though they don't get paid, but their position hinges on people liking them. I mean, politicians are usually pleasers, even if some are gruff or, put up some kind of exterior. So they are going to say, when you say, we help people get health care, and this is what we did this last year, there will be a lot of nodding. There will be like, oh, that's wonderful. Like, thank you for your work. That is not the same as voting yes on a bill. You really, it's awkward, but you kind and this is how, like, I make this mistake all the time too. And sometimes it's so awkward because they're like, I'm going to do everything I can to support you. And then it would be weird for you to say, like, so can we count on your vote when this comes up in committee? Like, that would be weird, right? You sort of have to use a little bit of common sense. But you really want to come away from that meeting at least having made the ask or feeling like they committed so hard to your issue that it would be embarrassing to ask them beyond that. So make the ask, find out where they're a yes. And by the way, a legislator saying like, is this going to be recurring money? We're concerned about federal funding, so we're not going to have a lot of money maybe to spend on a recurring basis for FY27, fiscal year 27, which is what you'll be talking about next session. They may say something like that. That doesn't mean they're going to vote no, or that behind closed doors, they won't advocate for your bill. So good legislators will ask questions like that. So don't take them as having concerns that that's a no. Also, just because they won't commit to a yes, there's sort of that funny line, it's in a John Mayer song, seems to me that maybe pretty much always means no. That's not the case with legislators. There are a lot of legislators who just, as a matter of principle, um, will not give a firm yes to a bill. They're going to say, I want to hear the discussion in committee. Um, that doesn't mean they're a no. It just means they've been burned before when they gave a yes and then something came up in committee that they hadn't anticipated, and all of a sudden they vote no, and then people kind of bash them on social media or to their face. And like I said, they're kind of pleasers, so they don't like people calling them, saying you broke your promise to me, that sort of thing. So, but try to get a yes, try to get a hard yes. And this last session, I was doing some work for an environmental group, and before the speaker would let one of these bills to protect clean water or help keep clean water in the state of New Mexico, they said, we want to have 37 hard yeses. And there were like 5 or 6 people who just said, I don't give commitments like that. I think all of them ended up voting for it, but we had to go to other people and say, like, so can we tell the speaker that you're a yes when this comes up on the floor because he's asking us? And it's okay to tell them to share, the speaker asked us to get a hard count. And that can actually be a good way to make it less awkward for you to be making the asking. Say, the speaker is asking us for this count, or, I'm working with our sponsor and they really want to try to get a count before we go to committee. But making sure you really get that ask. And again, it's difficult. Like I fail at it all the time, but try to do that when you can, because when you're doing your vote count, especially with your allies, you don't want to say someone's a yes just because they were friendly and then have it blow up in committee or on the floor. Um, Making sure your votes are in the room. And this is something that your leadership at the health councils is great. They have the cell phone numbers of a lot of legislators. Especially if you're counting on the majority party to get things done. The majority party is the party that will most likely get, sort of by definition, a lot of other bills passed. That means somebody who's sitting in a committee that you need their vote for, and that they've told you, like, oh God, yeah, I love you guys, I'm going to vote for this. They may be presenting a bill in another committee, and you need to work with the chairperson of the committee, with possibly your expert, and certainly your sponsors, to make sure that you don't bring up the bill, it doesn't come up for a vote unless and until you have enough, literally like 5 out of 9 or 6 out of 11. It's majority vote. And by the way, a tie, little cliche, is a tie, it dies. So if it's a 4-4 vote because some people were out of the room, you just lost your bill and you may have to wait another year. Now, they might bring it up later. There are sort of some procedural ways to bring stuff up again, even after it dies. But that's difficult. And then it's an extra heavy lift, and people come, whoever voted against it's going to complain about it a lot. So make sure not only do you have to know what your vote count is in the committee, you have to make sure those people are physically in the room. Use personal stories. That's it's probably one of the things I should move up in this list. Use personal stories. People, legislators want to understand policy and data, but when they hear about how a kid who ended up having leukemia only got care because of the work that a health council did, that's life changing for that kid, but that's something that that legislator won't forget. And it really illustrates, it puts a face to the numbers that you're giving. All the data and the numbers are really great to have. But if you can get some personal stories, and man, if you can get some of those people to the roundhouse to tell stories, that's something legislators will remember. Again, they've got 1,000 issues they're working on. They can only be experts in a handful of them, probably in whatever profession they personally work in. Um, there aren't that many legislators who work in healthcare. So when you are able to personalize those stories, and really let them know that when they fund health councils, they're impacting people's lives, that's unforgettable. So, and especially if it happens to be somebody in their area. Next. Let me stop there. Any questions? Just check in, like, or any like quick anecdotes, like, yes, like I've had this happen, or something where you're like, that isn't my experience. Geraldine.
Yeah, I was just also thinking about one of the challenges that we've had, at least on the Alliance's end, is some of the fiscal impact reports on the ones that are developed by the legislative finance staff. And sometimes it makes, I don't know if the right word is, it could make us look a little bad depending on what they pulled together. For example, we had a CDC grant. We were deep in COVID-19 response efforts and vaccinations, but the report said no health councils are actively doing COVID work. So when we went into the session, and I don't know how many legislators read that, we did a lot of education too. So I feel like sometimes that can be a challenge, but I also echo the education, which is what we try to do one-on-one with legislators and during the committees. But I just wanted to touch on that because it's definitely something that comes up on a yearly basis.
Geraldine, that is an amazing and frankly, like super high level, sophisticated point to bring up. And honestly, because of that, I am going to add that somewhere in these slides going forward. So there are things called fiscal impact reports. And to your question, you don't know how many people read them? All of them read them. And there's a weird thing about fiscal impact reports where it is almost treated as gospel. And that's not just in New Mexico, it's in Nevada and Arizona and Colorado and Florida and other states have done. Like when they have these staff people who are, ostensibly, and they pretty much are sort of neutral, and they write a report, like that can make or break your bill a lot of the time. In New Mexico, we call them fiscal impact reports, FIRs. Um, the good news is you can get in touch with these people, especially if one comes out that you don't like. But it's something that your sponsors should be all over. Like they should be providing information to those staff people. A good sponsor will do that. And they'll say, hey, like, here's a couple of pages I have from the health councils, and they need to do this. But you, as an advocate, you can go to the LFC. And by the way, like it'll say on the FIR who the person is who did it. And if it doesn't, you can go to the front desk of it's over in the Secretary of State's building, the annex, which is Capitol North, they also call it. It's it's basically between the Roundhouse and the Supreme Court building. So it's on, what is that, Don Gaspar? Um, it's sort of across from the Attorney General's and Department of Education's buildings. Um, you can go there, and their offices are in the basement, sort of, it's called level one, but it's in the basement. You can go there and ask, hey, can I set up a meeting with this person? And the good news is they're professional staff and they're super smart and they love to get it right. So if you can show them that there's something in the FIR that's incorrect, they will change it. Especially when it's like a hard factual thing like that. So Geraldine, amazing point, and that's something really high level lobbying effort when you're starting to talk to those level of staff. Of course, all the rules about treat staff with respect and all that apply there too. But yeah, like legislative finance staff over in the annex, the Capitol North area, those are people that if the FIR doesn't come in the way you want, you definitely want to be in touch with them. So thank you, Geraldine. Amazing point. Any other sort of questions before we're going to move into a little bit of role playing because I want to respect everyone's time. But I'm free until like 3 o'clock, so I'll stay as long as you guys want me to. I've probably heard way too much from me already, but I will stay as long as you guys want me to. But I do want to get to the role playing, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. Oh, allies and coalitions, yeah. So you, in particular, you have county commissioners who believe in your mission. You have sometimes people in the health delivery systems who might want to support you. Bring them on board. Don't just be like, oh, it's about us, we're asking for money. Bring people who aren't direct recipients of the money to say, like, yeah, tribal governments, like, hey, these health councils have really helped us deliver what we need to for our people. Enrique, thank you so much for being here. I can't read the whole thing, but I appreciate your being here. And I will also make sure if it's not, I think it's on the handout, it's on the slides. Um, I'll give you my cell phone and my email if any of you ever have any questions, happy to follow up offline. Um,
Thanks, Carter.
Thanks, Enrique. Be upfront with coalition partners about bright lines that you have. Like some of them may say, like, oh, well, I want the money to be used for this. If it's something that you can't live with, like, again, you always want to be polite and sort of be well liked and respected in the building, but some of that involves being upfront with what your bright lines are, right? And it's okay to have differences with people, but the more upfront and honest, you know, polite, but hey, this is something we can't support, that makes coalitions go a lot better. If you are in a really formal coalition where your coalition is going to put their seal or logo on something, or you're going to have somebody testifying committee on behalf of the coalition, make sure you talk about your decision-making process like November, December at the latest, because you don't want to be deciding these things on the fly when you're in the session, because that's just a mess, and then coalitions fall apart and people get mad. And usually if a bunch of advocates aren't on the same page, legislators just sort of throw up their hands and they're like, hey guys, like we want to help, but you have to figure out your stuff beforehand. Like I've worked a lot for labor organizations. It's been most of my career. And when labor is divided, legislators are like, you guys have to figure this out and come back when you're at least not opposing something. We actually lost a nurse safe staffing legislation bill this year because well, really one union was like, if we don't get mandatory, blah, 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 they were just, it was all good stuff they were advocating for, but it was stuff that wasn't going to pass. And they insisted on including it. And we were like, no, it won't move if that's in there. And it just sort of died because we couldn't all come to an agreement. So try to work all that out before the session, and especially whatever your process is going to be. That's a good idea. I want to go to the next one. Yeah, it's okay. You're going to have opponents sometimes. You guys might not have opponents so much, but it'll happen sometimes. Be respectful to them. Know their issues. This is just a great advocacy thing in general, or lobbying piece in general. Know what your opponent's arguments are. Don't just say like, no, they're wrong and they're stupid and blah, blah. I mean, I know you wouldn't do that, but don't just dismiss it. Like understand their arguments. And it's rare that anybody comes up to that building with nothing that makes sense. They might have reasons. They might say healthcare is better done as a purely private endeavor, and we shouldn't have these quasi-government funded entities involved at all. Know how to make the arguments against that, right? Because there are going to be some legislators who say, yeah, the private sector is more efficient. I represent government employees. I deal with that argument all the time. Come up with the counterpoints to that. There may be some truth to it. Maybe the private sector is more efficient sometimes, but then it's not nearly as transparent. And they're also going to be looking to do only what makes them a profit. And what the health councils do is get information and services to people where nobody's going to make a profit. These are people who almost by definition, a lot of the time, don't have a lot of money to go and get healthcare on the private marketplace. So be prepared to make those arguments like, yeah, but the very people who need it the most are the people where a private company isn't going to deliver it to them, or isn't likely to, because there's no money, there's no profit to be made. So that's just one example of how you would counter, because like I said, I don't think you have a lot of opponents, but it might be sort of ideological opposition where some people, and especially the current minority party, might be like, hey, I believe in the private sector. Why are you guys putting your nose in this stuff? So they wouldn't put it that rudely, but that's the upshot of what I would assume a lot of your opposition is. So be able to have really respectful, like, hey, I get why they would say that, but think about it. They're not going to be serving the same universe of people that we are. Um, so, and then obviously some of it depends on whether you're playing offense or defense, how you handle opponents. Also, if you have opponents who listen to their arguments, like maybe they have a point and you can amend your bill in a way that doesn't really hurt your bill, but that makes sure that it passes. Like that's okay. Like a legislature is a place where people representing all 2.1 million New Mexicans are coming together, and there are 2.1 million opinions about how healthcare should be handled. It's okay to compromise as long as you're really able to still deliver what you need to, and you're not sacrificing your core principles. So compromise is really not a dirty word. And that's something that if you keep lines of communication open with your opposition, you may be able to save your bill, get it through. And some of how you handle opposition really depends on a good understanding of, do they have the votes to kill this bill? Are their arguments so persuasive that we'll get a veto at the back end of this? So we need to sort of address them and maybe work something out. So understanding the strength of your opponents and their arguments is a really important part to passing at least controversial legislation. Next. I'll go very quickly through this. I know we're running up on the hour, but again, use to mobilize people and opinion, use your toolkit at that nmhealthcouncils.org site. That is, like I said, one of the very best, maybe the best webpage I've seen for an advocacy organization. It is super professional level stuff. Line up personal testimony. One thing that's difficult is, you guys had a great lobby day. I was part of that. I did a training there. And hopefully it was helpful during the session. I know you got some decent money out of it, not what you were asking for, but I think it was the best money you've ever received out of the session. So you did a fantastic job this last year. Your lobby days might not coincide, especially if you set it up, months in advance, which you really should. It might not coincide with when you have a committee hearing. But if you do have a committee hearing, and this is where it's important to develop relationships with committee chairs, um, make sure that you're going to be like the first one heard that day so that you don't get held up behind a bill that took 3 hours of committee time and we're going to have to roll your bill to the next committee meeting. Because when you have people coming up, especially if they're coming up from sort of beyond Albuquerque and Espanola, if people are driving more than an hour, it's tough to get them up a second time. So really work with your committee chairs if you have people who are going to tell those personal stories, and especially people who don't do it for a living, who don't have a lot of money. That's why they're getting health insurance, through some public entity. Really try to work with your committee chairs to lock that down as much as you can. Nothing is ever guaranteed up there. You have to give a little bit of grace to those committee chairs sometimes, but the more you can do to try to lock it in, the more likely it is that that'll work. Obviously, press is an important part of what you do. I know you can't be partisan, but that's all the better sometimes if you can send out nonpartisan messages to the press about why this is so important for so many New Mexicans. I think we're getting close to role play, and I will leave it to all of you as to how much time we can put into that. Next slide. Oh, doing thank yous. Legislators love to feel like they're appreciated. Negative accountability at the bottom of the slide is tough for some of you because you really can't be partisan. And if you sort of attack somebody, oh, thanks, I appreciate that. If you do have to go negative on someone, maybe one of your coalition or some allies will have to do that. That's not something that that you guys are able to do. But positive stuff, there's no restriction on your bye, Sarah, appreciate it. Thank people. It's like all of us. We all love to be thanked. Next slide. I think we're into role play now. Yes. So, Sam, Geraldine, I will leave it up to you. We have 8 people. We could break into 7 people. We could break into maybe 1 or 2 groups if you want to do role playing. You do have a cheat sheet. Thanks, Davina. I hope I pronounced that right. You do have a cheat sheet on things. It's sort of a checklist, but it's also something you should look at before you talk to legislators, and that's something you can print out and use anytime. Do you feel like doing some kind of role play? Would you rather just spend a little bit of time doing questions for those of you who are still here?
Yeah, Carter, we realized today and yesterday it's the NMPHA conference. So people may be hopping there, back here, and back because we have some 1 p.m. sessions on that conference end.
Mhm.
So maybe I'll open it to Joyce, Anthony, and Daryl. Do you want to do questions or role play at this time?
This is Anthony. I'd like to do a comment.
Go for it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bundy. Having done the legislative experience a couple of times, these are just, I think whatever you're describing is very good. And to continue with your education of us as health councils in terms of understanding the process is excellent. First thing is that the state legislature is comprised of not everyday people, but people that have been voted by a certain section of population. So they have their allegiance to that. We in the health councils have been appointed only because of the certain allegiance that our quote unquote community people feel that we can articulate. But when you go to the state legislature, there's a couple of things that I have found that help me is to not listen to our own committee presentations, but to listen to those committees on how they interact with, in my world, with big pharma, big health insurance, big business, the American Medical Association, Dental Association, Hospital Association, and see how they act or react to that. And it gives me a sense of the legislators as to what they're thinking. They may be thinking just they may not be thinking public health. They may not be thinking of educating the community people, but actually direct services. And one of the other things is that I noticed there is a pecking order, just like in all societies, in all forms of government. The impact that certain quote unquote House representatives think of the senators, and then how the senators think of them as House representatives, as junior legislators, and how that pecking order filters into the committees that they're assigned. You mentioned earlier the finance committees on both houses and how they have the quote unquote strong arm as to say yay or nay. And so how to figure out who is the movers and shakers, I think is very good. One of the things that we as native tribes fail to understand and probably fail to maybe educate our community and tribal leaderships is the fact that on both houses, we have Senator Shindo and Representative Lenti that are co-chairs of these powerful committees, but I think and felt that we didn't take advantage of that. So the hierarchy of power is something that exists in all groups, all societies, and all agencies, and we need to be educated in how to strategize and deal with these individuals. Thank you for your presentation.
Anthony, super, super high level stuff there. Getting, especially for the kind of work that you do and the things you're asking for, getting House appropriations and Senate finance leadership in particular on board is really important. The Speaker of the House has a lot to do with what gets scheduled and heard. So does the House floor leader. Even the caucus leaders of both parties can be important in, even if there's one party that's not quite as receptive, if you reach out to them, and especially like Gail Armstrong, minority leader in the House, if you convince her that what you're doing is pretty valuable to them, she may never be one of your leaders, but how much people oppose what you're doing, including leadership in minority parties, is really important. And that's sort of the stuff you're talking about is where are the real power centers? Because there are people, frankly, I mean, they all get a vote, but there's some people who are sort of just learning the ropes. They may be newer, or maybe they've been there for a while and they just sort of accept, like, I'm a little bit of a backbencher. It's really like an English Parliament term, but it applies to American legislatures too. There are people who just show up, they vote, they want to do the right thing, but they don't want to chair any of the big committees and they don't want to have a leadership role. You need their votes, but you really need to get like the Speaker of the House on board. You need to get the president pro tem and the Senate majority leader in the Senate. They sort of split duties of what the speaker does in the House. So, and then Anthony, I think for tribal issues, that's really savvy. Like, go to some tribal people, and I know this is certainly not the tribal experience writ large, but I will tell you, it is absolute gospel up there that if there are things that tribal legislators and advocates and leadership of pueblos and the nations believe strongly in, it is given some, like, there's a little bit of deference, like, hey, you guys know your stuff. Like, if you think this is where some of the money that was going to go to tribes needs to go, there's a surprising amount of deference, like, hey, let's make that happen. So I think that's a really potentially, and Benny Shendo, Senator Shendo, and Representative Lente are both really well respected. You have Joseph Fernandez now, from up in the northwest corner of the state, who is young. This was his first session, but he had been an advocate for environmental groups up there before, and he is super, super sharp, and he knows people. And I think there are very few freshmen who get, sort of, shouldn't say freshmen, it's not gender equitable, first year legislators who get the kind of respect that Joseph Fernandez did this last year. So, and then honestly, even some non-natives, like Patty Lundstrom, she's a pretty conservative Democrat. She's not necessarily the first person I would go to for healthcare issues, but she represents an area with a lot of Navajo in particular. She wants to listen to those people, because if she were ever to be beaten in a primary, it's a heavily Democratic district. If she were ever to be beaten in a primary, it would probably be by a Native American, and she is aware of that. So she has a lot of incentive to deliver things that especially the Navajo Nation is asking of her. Frankly, same for George Munoz, who's chair of Senate Finance. He has a lot of Native Americans. I think his district includes Acoma and Laguna. So though you have some really powerful people in the legislature who aren't Native American, but where they have Native Americans who live in their district, and it is in their best interest to at least have an open door and really listen to what tribal leaders and Native Americans say, and other Native legislators.
Hey Carter, this is Daryl Madalena. How you doing?
Good, Daryl. How are you? Oh, and of
Good,
course,
good.
Representative of Madalena too. Used to be there and was sort of an excellent legislator as well.
Whom happens to be my father, by the way.
Oh, Daryl, you ran for that seat, didn't you? Is
I'm
that
a
right?
former, I'm a former Sandoval County Commission chair as well.
Yeah.
So that was one thing I was going to advocate too. Is maybe not even you mentioned county commissions, is that maybe presents to the county commissions on their monthly meetings, or possibly get a hold of Joy Esparza at the Association of Counties, since they do have the winter executive sessions in Santa Fe, to possibly get in front of the, um, for example, you have a county affiliates, in front of the commissioner affiliates, to get these points across, especially if you have a letter of recommendation that will really bold, hold well in committee hearings, and Anthony and I are tribal members in Pueblo Jemez, to have um, those type of backings, when you're in, you know, to present at a county to say, hey, 11 of New Mexico's 33 counties have tribal representation. They need to be heard, because even within still then, uh, some of those counties are still very limited in having Native American representation. In 2016, well, 29 through 2016, I believe only 7 of us commissioners in New Mexico were Native American out of the 11 counties. So it's still a pretty small minority. So presenting in front of those county commission boards, I think really does bode well. And it's a very underrated place to be. And as Anthony said, a lot of natives are skeptical, because some of us Pueblos are still very traditional, where voting is a brand new concept. Why does my vote matter? Why should I vote? We still hear those, even though we've had Senator Shendo, my father, myself, and several other Jemez that were previously elected officials. You still hear those at the polling sites. Why should I vote? Why does my vote matter? My vote doesn't count, because to us Pueblos, especially traditional ones, Jemez, Zia, Santo Domingo, we still appoint traditionally, and we don't vote constitutionally.
Yeah, no, all great points. And Geraldine noted in the chat that you did partner with the Association of Counties, is now called NM Counties, which I don't know why they went away from the old name.
And I
But
see.
I will tell you, as Daryl, I'm sure you know, and Gerald and Sam, they get good lobbyists. I've worked with them. I've worked against them on some issues, right? No permanent enemies, no permanent friends. Their lobbyists, I think Jason Weeks, Catherine Crociata, really some of the best in the building. Joy shows up there a fair amount. Um, Grace Phillips, their general counsel. I'm sure she registers as a lobbyist because she's there so much. They are absolutely a powerhouse. And because you do partner with the counties on so many things, that I think I listed them as potential allies on that slide, but well worth bringing up again. The more you can work with them, you may even work with the municipal league. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what your relationship is like with like the city of Albuquerque, city of Santa Fe, city of Las Cruces, but municipal league, association of counties, NM counties are super important people to get in front of. And remember, like a lot of legislators, they know their county commissioners and they are elected with them on the same ballots and they partner. Some of them say, you run for state legislature, I'll run for county commission. Um, Great points, Daryl. Super powerful points and some of the best partnerships you can enter into.
Thank you, Daryl and Anthony, for questions. Joyce, I seen you unmute.
Yeah, so I'm in Quay County, and we actually have three people that are listed as representatives for us. One is Campos, who has nothing at all to do with us, even when we try to contact him and say, hey, this is an issue. And it's just because he has a small sliver of our county. So he really ignores anything from Quay County because we have no influence or potential or sway in his legislative process. The other two, Chatfield and Woods, know who we are. They know what we do. They're very receptive to the work that the Health Council does here in Quay County.
Chatfield and who?
Great information, but for me, it's not easy just to run up to Santa Fe to spend the day, just one location where I am. And I really, truly am busy doing the work of the Health Council. So it's hard to say, well, I'm going to go spend a day at the legislature. You know, we do that because the Alliance has a meeting when the legislature is going on. And we've gone fairly consistently to that and spoken to our legislators and gone in. But for me to go, for the most part, I really don't think that I'm seen. I really don't think that I'm heard by the overwhelming mass of the legislative body there. So I really appreciate what the council does, what the Alliance does on behalf of all of the councils, because when you're on the rural edge, you know, you're forgotten in a lot of things. It's just the way it happens because that's where you're at. So I understand what you're saying. I think we're really good about supporting stuff with signatures, supporting things the way that we can here. And like I said, knowing who our legislators are and having a good connection with them as well. So a lot of what you're saying just seems over and above where I am and what I can really honestly realistically do. So great content, but I think it's just really too far of a stretch for me to be doing all of that.
Joyce, who did you say your other representative is besides Jack Chatfield?
Woods, Pat Woods, and Campos.
So let me say this. So I have a list of well, it's blurred, but a list of all
Yeah,
the
and I
committees.
know they're both on there. And like I say, we have really good connections with them and we speak with them and they know who we are and they have supported us with extra funding outside of just the Health Council legislative things. So I think they're supportive of what's going on here in Quay County and for health councils in general.
That's fantastic. So especially on some of these finance issues and on issues like I said at the top of this, where there really should be some bipartisan support, having a guy like Jack Chatfield or Pat Woods in your corner is huge because they are in the minority party, but they are both well respected and they're both on finance committees.
Yes.
So you know, a lot of the time what'll happen is the majority party leadership in each of those committees, and they really get a lot of run. Like the budgets really are run through those committees. I mean, the speaker and the president pro tem of the Senate, they have something to say, but budgets really are those two committees. And having good allies on that is gold, including in the minority party, because what both committees, House Appropriations and Finance and Senate Finance, love to do is they love to have at least some minority party votes when their bill comes to the floor. And what can drive that is that Jack Chatfield or Pat Woods, Senator Representative Chatfield or Senator Woods, will sometimes just say like, "Hey, this is something I really want to see in there," and then Chairman Munoz or Chair Small will say like, "Okay, I think we can do that for you at this level." So it is amazing that you have relationships with them. Keep utilizing those. It's disappointing that Senator Campos doesn't pay as much attention. Um, but like we've alluded to, they pay attention to what gets them elected. What you could do with Senator Campos, and I know Las Vegas is a drive too, you know, set up a meeting with him. You know, you can email his official address, try to set up a meeting in the interim with him and really try to get him to pay a little more attention. Or, you know, conversely, you're in Quay County.
Mhm.
I assume there's something in San Miguel County, right? Is there a health council
Uh,
for San Miguel County?
it would be
Yes.
really small.
Well, Joyce, maybe partner with your San Miguel counterpart and see if either they or you and they together can get a meeting. Because you're right, he will pay more attention. That's sort of just the way the world is, right?
Yeah.
He gets elected out of San Miguel County primarily. See if you can partner with your counterpart in San Miguel County and get a meeting with him. Just because he hasn't paid attention in the past doesn't mean that if he doesn't, you know, there's a lot of squeaky wheel gets the grease in legislative work. And if your San Miguel counterpart, no matter how small that office is or what the scope of their projects are, um, it'll be someone he would be willing to meet with. And if you can sort of piggyback on that, that might be a good way for you to get at least in front of him and raise his awareness of what the health councils do.
That's a good suggestion. The other issue is just really finding the time to engage in that way, making those connections and spending a day. I can't tell you how busy our last 2 months have been.
For
And
sure.
we do the work for our county, and that's really where our focus is at. So it's hard to loop in these extra, oh, by the way, I need to check on this thing over here so I can talk to a guy who really never listens to us.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's you do so much with so little. I mean, you guys are truly saints for what you do. I love working with you because I believe so much in what you do. Yeah, if you can find the time, if you know that you're going to have a week or two where it's a little bit down, at the very least, block out 20 minutes to talk to your San Miguel counterpart and see if they can really push him on this.
So good ideas. And it would be interesting to know if they have any better relationship with him or not.
They can always start to develop one. Every relationship
Yeah,
starts with a first
somewhere,
meeting.
somebody reaching out. So thank you so much for your presentation and the time. It really very interesting things.
Good, good. Thank you so much for your work. Sam, Geraldine, happy to stay on. We can do role playing, but I mean, we have some pretty professional people here who have done some of this stuff before. So I leave it up to you if we want to try to sort of break out and do that. But at the very least, you do have this, you know, advocacy checklist. So yeah, role playing checklist that really is good for people to go over as they start to engage in this, both during next session, but in these, we're only 7 months away from the start of the session already. So, but hopefully that's something that people can use too if you don't want to sort of do it right now.
Yeah, I think Sam, I think we could definitely share the checklist and considering we've got 3 folks here Daryl's very experienced. Anthony's always with us up at the Capitol. And then Joyce, I just want to say thank you. I know you may feel like your voice does not matter, but we definitely do have the support from the two legislators. And I think what's important too is the Alliance always advocates we meet health councils where they're at. So if it's maybe not coming to the Capitol, it's maybe getting signatures or sending in video testimonies from community members. So I think whatever you can do counts. And we also know not all health councils have the capacity to advocate. So I think we're good with ending here on a good note and some good questions. if that
Carolyn,
feels
I'm
good
so
to you all.
sorry. Can I just throw one more thing in for Joyce in particular?
Yes.
Most committees, in fact, I think almost all of them now, at some point and to some extent, will allow Zoom testimony. And the sign up is pretty easy. There are 3 Senate committees that require advanced sign up. That's Senate Judiciary, Senate Finance, and one other. There are 3 committees that require advanced sign up in the Senate. None of the House committees require advanced sign up. nmlegis.gov is the website. But for those of you who can't make it, or if you did make it and then they rolled whatever you were going to testify on, that can be an option if you're willing to get online and testify by Zoom.
That's good information to know. So thank you for that. But I really do think like Val does a better job. Geraldine,
She's amazing.
people that have a very strong voice and are eloquent with their words and get a good message across. I'm really happy to support all of this stuff, and when I see our legislators, you know, we talk with them, we appreciate how they support us, and always are saying, hey, we really do understand you're doing a lot for health councils, not just for Quake County, but for health councils. And so we are doing what we can. We do the signatures, we do the videos, we go up for the meeting, we go to legislative offices then. And for us to go beyond that would be a harder stretch. So I think everybody fits in somewhere. And I think we're doing what we can, and maybe we can do some more at another point.
Perfect. Thank you, Joyce. We totally support that. So any other comments, questions, maybe before we hop off for today's session?
I think one thing too is the interim sessions or the interim committees are about to start here within the next month and a half or so that will run all the way to the end of the year. So they will be updated with monthly meetings. Some of them run 3-day stretches. I know Highlands University, I think, hosted the water natural resources for 3 days or something like that. So there's always a place where those type of meetings will be taking place to take a look at.
Mhm.
And they do travel around the state. That's right.
They do.
Perfect. I know we do year-round advocacy, so we're preparing for the interim. I know Val says advocacy never stops, so great point, Daryl. And Anthony said thanks for the presentation and chat. So maybe with that, we could end today's session. And we will share the recording and materials and the checklist with health councils who weren't able to make it or had to leave a little bit early. So thank you all so much. And thank you, Carter, for another amazing advocacy training. The first one was great, and happy to have you back here on Zoom with us again. So thank you.
And thanks for the work you guys do every day. Keep it up.
Absolutely. Happy to be in support of health councils, but health councils make it easy for us. All right. Well,
Thanks,
have a great
everyone.
weekend, and
You
we'll
too.
see you all next week.